never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it'll change your life. Take a chance.
All right, Rob, we got to put on our best 1930s, 1940s film reel news broadcaster voice. As from the nation of Hollywood to the Empire State, this podcast is delivered to you via high-speed airmail so that we can talk
That's
about
right.
the...
We're coming to you over the airwaves, beamed straight from our studios here in Grand... I don't know, somewhere in the middle of America, where all things come from in a glorious...
No, not America. The industrial states of America. Chicago.
The industrial states of America. From Chicago, the Windy City. That's us. That's right. This is Dungeon Master of None.
I'm Dungeon Master Matt.
And I'm Dungeon Master Rob. And today, Matt, what are we talking about? Why are we doing the voice?
We're talking about Crimson Skies, a incredibly obscure and forgotten property that is ripe for Dungeon Master inspirations, ? Actually, I just want to talk about it and subject Rob to my insane knowledge about this property.
I have done this to Matt once, twice. I have a whole list of things that I'm going to make.
Rob's got a whole list.
So it's only fair that Matt gets to do this to me at least one time. And I know a little bit about Crimson Skies. Matt, was it a GameCube game? There was Xbox game. You and I played
Xbox original
in college, and you ran a couple of brief campaigns. So I'm vaguely familiar with the aesthetic, but I don't actually know anything except that there are biplanes and zeppelins and some kind of alternate history, which already makes it very cool, but that's literally everything that I know about Crimson Skies.
Excellent. And that's probably more than 99% of our listeners know. But if you're not familiar, Crimson Skies is a pulp action setting in North America, alternate history, 1930s, full of a balkanized United States where air pirates rule the skies, and the feuding former nations of the United States of America rely on private militias of adventurer pilots who guide shipping, protecting it from the depredations of pirates and foreign invaders, or, are like pirates with a heart of gold themselves that, steal from the Vanderbilts and, give to the rural poor of Dust Bowl, Oklahoma or something, because it's the 1930s.
Yeah. And aesthetically, there are a lot of things that I like about this. And I like all historians, like a little bit of alternate history thinking. And there's a couple of, there's a handful of tropes, themes that reappear, right? And a very common one, probably the most common one, is what if the Confederacy won, or what if the Nazis won? Those are stupid and they suck. They're boring. One thing, however, that is cool, that is also I think has kind of become its own sort of mini genre is,
What if America was destroyed?
What if we never stopped using Zeppelins? What if everything was everything was Art Deco and cool for forever? And right.
Imagine if you've ever seen the picture of the coolest Art Deco train of all time.
Yes,
right. You know the one I'm talking about.
Right, I know the one.
Yeah. You're getting excited right now.
I am turgid. I love an Art Deco train. I love an Art Deco building. I love a big dude on the side of a building, but he's angular. Yeah.
Imagine that for an adventure setting with planes and zeppelins, and then you have Crimson Skies.
And tell me if I'm off base here, Matt. But again, this is sort of like a mini genre, but this reminds me of vibes wise, of the Rocketeer. And Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, another thing that nobody saw and wasn't very good, but I liked the vibe of Sky Captain, the World of Tomorrow. But yeah, that's kind of
so did I.
The impression that I'm getting.
A movie that costs around $100 million to make and looks like it should have been made for $3 million.
Yeah,
They had to hire Jude Law and Angelina Jolie for like 10 minutes on camera or whatever. It's ridiculous, but it's a cool aesthetic. And if you like, hey, I like pulp action, like I don't know, The Shadow and Doc Savage, but also airplanes, it could provide a lot of DM inspiration. And so I want to get into, okay, where did this come from? It came from a company called FASA, who probably a lot of people are familiar with because they made a ton of role-playing game material. They started off making, like, you know, it's literally like someone in a garage was like, all right, we're making Traveler supplements. And then they published Star Trek, the role-playing game. And then they went on to publish much more successful things like Battle Droids, which became Battle Tech. And after they were like established as a successful company, two of the members, including one of the founders, Jordan Weissman and Dave McCoy, you might have heard of Dave McCoy, worked on, he was like the developer of Defense Grid, if you ever played that. You know.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's a deep cut. Yeah.
Yeah. They sort of were like, okay, we've got this idea for a property and we're going to turn it into, we're becoming a video game company now from a tabletop role-playing game company, turning it into a video game. And they ended up slapping together kind of a narrative board game / narrative miniatures game. It straddles the line between the two. And in doing so, they produce like 15 source books kind of by accident, so it's a pretty fleshed out world. And if you're wondering what you're getting here, to quote Jordan Weissman here, Crimson Skies is just combining two classic male fantasies. You get to be a pirate, you get to be a pilot.
Men only want one thing, Matt, and it's to fly a cool plane and be a pirate. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, this is, to me, like, if you're making your own custom setting, regardless if you're like, I don't give a shit about the 1930s or pulp action, like this basic idea of you take two classic fantasy empowerments that get people excited and you combine them is such a great idea, right? Jordan Weissman has done it before, like several times, right? It's like, okay, you get to be a knight and you get to drive a robot. You get to be a pirate and be a pilot. You get to be an elf magician and a hacker. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we've talked about this a bunch. We talked about this in our episode on the Eberron supplement, Frontiers Eberron, right? Frontiers Eberron, right? It is a great, easy win to just like smash two things together. You know, space western is a classic, but you know, pulp pilot, you know, pirate pilot. That makes perfect sense to me. There's probably also like, this is, I mean, if you're trying to do something even like teensy bit unique, there's probably millions of these combinations that, you know, have not really been explored. So we'd love to hear your mashups of things that we haven't covered yet. But yeah, this is the logic behind it is very sound.
The thing about doing it at your table is that it can be super easy to mash some things up based on the interest of your players, and like space western in no way has to be original for it to be the best campaign you've ever run. Now, of course, if you want to, like, I don't know, produce a movie or a multi-platform video game saga that's released on PC and then the Xbox or whatever, and also has click miniatures, then yeah, maybe you need to be a little bit more original if you want to be successful. But it seems like the whole idea of Crimson Skies was just like some people at FASA just got really into weird aviation of the 1930s, and we're like, how can we make this more exciting so that it's not just set in the Spanish Civil War or something like that? How can we extend that logic to the rest of the world? And that's kind of what they did. And apparently Weissman like read a bunch about the golden age of piracy in the Caribbean and like what geopolitical factors played into the fact that there's a bunch of military trained, stateless, mostly, you know, men who are doing piracy.
Yep. That's what I studied. That it is a very interesting period when you have, anytime you have a bunch of unemployed men running around, especially if they were previously employed.
Maybe doing war, for example.
Interesting things happen, and by interesting, I mean usually bad, especially if the thing that they were doing before they were unemployed was, being in the military. So that's,
Right.
I mean, that's a very solid, even if that's literally the only thing that he knows about the period, that is a very solid grounding for, creating a interesting and dynamic setting. I'm not like, I'm not an aviation enthusiast, Matt, but I, like everybody, I like planes. I think they're neat. A lot of the planes from the 30s and 40s and 50s are, they're cool planes.
Oh yeah, the P-38 Lightning. I mean, look at that thing. It's cool.
A Mustang, great name for a plane. Like,
Ooh,
every nation had their own, like, this is what the Chinese planes look like. This is what the German planes look like. This is what the Italian planes look like, and they all have their own, like, they actually got like designers. It wasn't, smooth, featureless slop. It was, I don't know if it mattered, but it was cool.
Current, like, 7th generation fighters or whatever, they all look the same or whatever.
Oh, I gotta
like
say,
in
though,
the 30s and 40s.
The new Chinese fighter, it looks sick. It looks like a deadly triangle. They're doing something cool over there. But I mean, it's a really,
I will give you that. Yeah. No, that they were still figuring out like what would make a good plane that's good at like killing people, and there's a ton of experimentation in this. And if you're like interested, check out the XP-55 Cinder or the Hinschel P-75, the Kyushu J7W Shinden. Like, there are just so many from all over, like really wacky looking designs that at the same time look badass. Now, did they actually fly well or do anything cool? No, they didn't. But they looked cool, and Crimson Skies kind of takes that as like, well, what if all the cool looking ideas for planes and prototypes that they built during this time, they just worked. They were super awesome, and they designed planes that like look like an X-wing or one of these experimental planes.
This is the thing that I remember from the video game, and I don't remember very much, but that there were all these like batshit like airplane designs, and they all had like different, like, they had like speed and maneuverability and firepower and whatever, and they were theoretically balanced, but like none of those things would ever fly in like real life. They were absolute, like, totally bizarre. But I guess that was cool about it, is like you could fly these really like unique, weird, based on like real like aviation designs planes. I mean, it really was like a Wild West, and Matt's correct. Most of these planes sucked. They were not like, they were not actually like useful in combat, but it was an interesting time for planes. You like planes? We talked about trains earlier. Trains, planes, automobiles.
No more trains.
Yeah, everything was weird.
No
cool.
more automobiles. We got gyrocopters, and no more trains. We've got zeppelins. People forget there was a brief moment in time when nations had either passenger or military zeppelins. After World War I, the United States bought a ton of like German zeppelins and renamed them things like the Los Angeles and the Akron. And while they were really cool, and you could, look up a bunch of pictures of, oh, hey, there's a Zeppelin flying over the Empire State Building. Wind is kind of a problem for rigid airships, and it turns out there's a lot of wind in the atmosphere, and so I mean there's still use for like floating things in the sky. It's just not as useful as Crimson Skies assumes that basically all interstate commerce, and by interstate I mean between North American nations, like the industrial states of America, Dixie, the Empire State, Republic of Texas, the People's Collective, is done via Zeppelin, which is super cool. Rob and I both love ships of all kinds, and Zeppelins are among the coolest ships.
I'm sure there is some sort of like, I'm sure I should be wary of like, I don't know, some like nascent fascist impulse for being excited about trains and Zeppelins or something like that. But every time I see one of those pictures of like a Zeppelin docking at the Empire State Building, I'm like, that's the coolest thing ever. Why? What could have been? Like, this is the future we were promised. Why don't I have Zeppelins? Yeah.
This is really speaking of the future of promise, it's really, I'm pretty sure someone had to have read H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come. I don't know if you've read that one, Rob, but it's,
I'm like, I haven't read it. I am vaguely familiar with the idea behind it, but no, it's
one of his many predictions was, okay, well, World War II, I think, will happen, or World War I will happen again, or something like that. Okay, not a far-fetched
Yeah.
thing when you're riding in the interwar period, but also just like air power will rule the skies. And of course, a lot of people thought about this.
Yeah.
And, he describes these massive fleets of bombers and zeppelins and stuff like that. And, that's kind of the idea here in Crimson Skies, too.
I mean, H.G. Wells is funny. His works are great and have such like a hold on our imaginations, but he was wrong about so much shit. he was not as prescient as he as he would have liked to have been, but it didn't matter.
Pro tip, write a bunch of sci-fi, predictive novels, and if you write enough of them, at least some of your ideas will end up in future tech, and then people will be like, wow, H.G. Wells wrote about this 100 years before it happened.
Helps to be a first mover, yeah. One of the, as we're talking about this, I'm reminded, in Kim Stanley Robinson's Ministry of the Future, one of his more recent novels, really interesting. A lot of like, it's kind of like a climate fiction thing, but one of the things that he sort of like suggests is that we would move back to airships for slower travel because they're more environmentally friendly than jet planes, and we would start to, just because we would adapt, we'd be forced to adapt by climate change to slower pace of life and technology, and I do think there's like something to that. That being said, there was the Hindenburg is only like the most like dramatic example. Like they didn't work very well. They just didn't do.
You did not want to be a crew member or a ground crew member for the USS Macon or whatever. Like the chances of you just dying in a windstorm off the Great Lakes or being lifted into the air while trying to hold it down were kind of good. But they were developing like these Zeppelin fleets. The idea was they would launch, do reconnaissance, move people around, launch parasite fighters. And Crimson Skies kind of says, okay, what if this all, worked? What if there were these fleets of Zeppelins for all these different types of things, but, the cool people, let's say pirates or, your group of miniatures in the board game or the video game had one of these. You can fly it around. Your squadron kind of launches out of its belly and then flies back into hooks and goes. So it's like, oh, it's the same thing as a sailing ship pirate game or a space game. This works super well for a role-playing game, in my opinion.
I think so too. Okay. Clearly I'm excited about this, but tell me more about, I'm just talking about like the general ideas. Get me, guide me in, Matt.
Okay. Well, so, they were developing this video game that was actually, in my opinion, I think it's pretty good for the PC. It didn't make a ton of money, but it eventually got them bought by Microsoft, which was maybe a win, and they made one of the like flagship titles for the original Xbox, which was a critical and I think commercial success. But of course, we know these things don't matter that much in the world of like video games. And actually, this was the end of FASA as we knew it. If not the designers themselves, they continued to make interesting things. But they were basically making all this, and they're like, we have this like fun board game with BattleTech, this miniature board game that's infinitely customizable, lets you tell a story about your mechs. You take your pilots and your machines from mission to mission. Why don't we do that here? And they kind of slapped together some board game rules there's a ton of dogfighting air combat board games. This one's mostly inspired by a game called Canvas Eagles, which I quite like. But they had a ton of fun with the world building and creating the nations and squadrons and games. So everything that they created for the board game, which would work equally well for a role-playing game setting, it feels really real in a fantastic, fun sense. Everything you read is very fun. There's like 1 million errors in the board game. Like, a plane is like described as incredibly maneuverable, and then its stats, don't match it. But you have all these cool plane designs. And actually, of the one thing you could still buy for Crimson Skies, because I don't think you can get the video games, and you'll have to pirate the source books or buy the novels secondhand, is the company Ironwind Metals, who makes pewter cast miniatures, still sells Crimson Skies miniatures. So that's what we got. That was what was made for Crimson Skies. Should we talk about the world building?
Well, sure. Let's talk about but first, like, you know, I you know, as a young man, I quite enjoyed all the, like, you know, all the Star Wars ships books that had all the, you know, the loadouts and the technical information and, you know, the cross sections. I think I still probably know, like, how many photon torpedoes an E-wing, sorry, proton torpedoes. Please don't get mad at me. An E-wing can carry. Was it like this? Like, did you have like breakdowns like that detailed on the planes?
Like, there's the aircraft manual and like
shit.
The manufacturing history, its service record.
Yes.
Notable
Tell me who built
pilots.
it. Tell me who built it.
Yeah.
Where are their shipyards? Yes.
Oh yeah.
Where are the
okay.
factories?
Well, this one's made by Howard Hughes Aviation, and this is produced by Sikorsky and, you know, Ravenscroft. All of these like I real and slightly fictional companies. It's like, oh yeah, I'm flying a Bel Air Cobra. Okay, perfect. Yeah, you're in a was it a Pratt and Whitney Peacemaker, right? Their manufacturing plant is in Tulsa. You know.
I love it.
All of this.
Yeah. Tell me about the world.
All
building.
of the technical
tell me about
details.
How did we get here?
So when we talk about an alternate history, right, people often ask, like, what are the point or points of divergence? And if we get to a balkanized United States in the 1930s, their basic points are that there was a second influenza pandemic in the 1920s, and that this is a funny one, the amendment to pass prohibition, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, failed. And so there was a big amount of smuggling and border closing between states, leading to local governments taking power, as instead of, you know, the New Deal sweeping in and creating the modern, you know, federal government in many ways. That never happens, and instead things move the other way. As you know, people are like, hey, you can't, you know, Kentucky is wet, but Ohio is dry, and so the Ohio River is now a closed border. We're tearing up the train lines.
I mean, that makes as much sense as anything else. I do. Looking back, like, prohibition is just like one of the wildest things that ever happened in American history. So
yeah, in real life, it passed with like 40 states signing on to it.
Yeah,
right. It was not a close thing that it to fail.
But I do like the idea, that was sort of like the breaking point, and instead of and that's actually smart, right? Because like the big consolidation of federal power, right? That does come in like in the New Deal era, including basically all of the hallmarks of like the modern American state. So if that never happens, it isn't wild to imagine, a balkanized United States.
Right. And so with those two things in the background, you know, the stock market crash hits, and everyone, you know, with pandemic plus smuggling, some more of the rebellious states challenge the federal government's authority. I think Utah passes a law making Mormonism the state religion, and the federal government fails to enforce its will. They're just like, well, what are you going to do? And then places starting with Texas begin declaring their independence and then rapidly forming coalitions. And so that's how we get many different competing states in North America, plus everything has to now be moved by air because there's no more trains connecting everything. And it's a big continent.
Right. Wait, hang on. That's really interesting. Like obviously, like without like a standardized rail system, it doesn't work, right? You don't have to have a federal government, but everybody has to agree on, you know, what gauge to use, and the types of, I don't know, all this shit that was made possible by having a united. So yeah, sure, why not? Given that we don't, this country doesn't have like a major, like not especially out west, like a major like a riverway. Why not Zeppelins? That makes sense.
Why
Zeppelins.
not? People people love aviation during this time, and so why not? They start building massive impractical zeppelins. If you imagine they're practical, then it all kind of works. And so,
I mean, it's
after the
well
breakup,
before the interstate system, right? So it couldn't be cars either. Yeah, sure, I buy it.
No.
Let's go.
After
Zeppelins.
the breakup of the United States, like there's a kind of a era of prosperity as these regional governments, expand and the people recover from the stock market crash. But of course, it's an unstable prosperity as these states are fighting each other. There's pirates and privateers everywhere. A brief tour of the United States, and this is, I think, a fun thing for players, is like, well, I have roots here, or I'm from here, or I know people here. Oh, I could make a character not from boring old Massachusetts, but from the Atlantic Coalition. Or not from New York, but from the Empire State, the new center of finance that is challenging to the West, the most of the Midwest, the industrial states of America, which after a failed Union drive, becomes kind of like a state capitalist, maybe slightly more fascist leaning than the other places, in that they're allies with Germany, and just really powerful industrial concerns run the Midwest, which I've been to the Midwest a lot, and that makes sense.
It's not hard to imagine. We're talking like the year in question. Like, I'm guessing this is.
The default year is 1937, so it's like 8 years after the breakup. Which, okay, realistically, that's really fast for everyone to kind of forget about the United States. But this is explained away by having some events where some Unionists, people who believe in the United States of America, commit some terrorist atrocities to try and keep the Union together, and so everyone kind of hates them. So even people who wish America was still a thing keep it to themselves for the most part. Yeah, we've got the smuggler land of Appalachia. That's main production is just booze, and sends it elsewhere. The loosely controlled Confederation of Dixie, where states' rights reign supreme. And this is where we get into some of the is that where you want to go with your alternate history? This is explained away by at least among pilots, right? There was a big push for integration of units, and of course, this is also the time of the Great Migration, and this talks about how that was accelerated during this time. So again, whenever you're hitting on real world history topics, you gotta be careful a little bit with this. I don't know how careful Crimson Skies actually is, but it's not.
I mean,
French Louisiana. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, so tell me about French Louisiana, then I will opine. Keep going.
No, opine away. I'll say French Louisiana, and then one you'll really like too.
It's just interesting because there's two things at work here, right? Like I think some people with alternate history are trying to reasonably extrapolate, and I don't I'm not against that, but also part of the fun of it is you can imagine things that are different, and so why imagine yourself a racist state, right? Why imagine yourself like a reformed confederacy? Why not like a successful Reconstruction? Like, why not like a
Right.
freedmen states of the South or something like that? Like,
I know. I think it would have been really great if they had added like the free city of Memphis, right on the border of Appalachia and Dixie, which has become a mecca and a haven for people who don't want to live in Dixie anymore, primarily Black Southerners. I think you could also say Southern states basically did whatever they wanted until the New Deal and even during the New Deal. So were things actually that different in this alternate history? There's not actually like slavery's back. That's not part of the setting as written. But yeah, you're right, Rob. Your opining is correct.
I mean,
and then we've got
again,
like some.
I'm an enthusiast of alternate history. It's just like this is a thing that happens a lot. Is we end up with like here's a modern state, but it's got slaves or it's apartheid or it's super aggressive and like okay, like that's not like unrealistic, but like if we're gonna do this, why not be truly creative? Anyway, tell me about the other states.
Well, Dixie, on the other hand, makes a great villain, right? Your players do not feel bad.
Yeah,
about
that's a
shooting
good
down
point.
some,
you do want a
some
bad
Dixie
guy,
planes.
and yeah.
And there are a couple, though. All in classic FASA fashion, all the states kind of suck in one way or another, and the true heroes are the adventuring pilots and independent squadrons that make the good decisions to help out everyday people. French Louisiana has become a quasi-like territory of France once again, backed up by the might of the French Foreign Air Legion. The Republic of Texas, which is annexed to Oklahoma, is like
love to see it.
Probably the most evil state in that they're like just warmongers to the end. They're constantly attacking every single one of their neighbors.
Amazing.
To their north is, I think, the one you would like the best, which is America's only communist nation, the People's Collective, from Kansas to Manitoba.
Okay, I was wondering about this. You mentioned this, and I was like, okay, where did they theorize? And I'm like, okay, given the time period, I can see that the Midwest
Party.
is People's Party, Eugene Debs,
but.
Okay, I like that. Yeah, to Manitoba.
So
that
it's
makes
not.
sense,
It's the Western. It's the Great Plains states: Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, the populous states.
Right.
And while they are communists, they are firmly anti-Comintern. They do not like the godless Soviet Union because they are a Christian communist state. Right? Every comrade pilot is both a devout believer in Marxism, but God as well.
I love that. That makes like perfect sense for an American communist state to be like some kind of like Jesus loving communalist, agrarian society. That's sick. That's awesome. Yeah.
In the West, there's a bunch of like disputed territories for your players to play around with. The pirate haven of Free Colorado, the Mormon nutjob state of Utah, the mining, extractive area of Arixo, and two First Nations or Native American Indian states, the Navajo Nation and the Lakota Nation, are independent in this setting. Rob, I wonder what you think about this, because this is like a recurring theme in FASA properties, like in Shadowrun, right? Is to have a like resurgence of Native American political power in one form or of another. And this I think there should have also been like it's only the 1929 when this has happened. It's not too late for the state of Sequoia in eastern Oklahoma to emerge. But I don't know. What do you think about this trope of FASAs, at least in the Shadowrun context, which I know you can speak on?
Yeah, I think this is interesting to me, and it sort of makes sense in the Shadowrun context because there's magic, and there's a lot of there's opportunity for First Nations people and Indigenous people to make their mark. I mean, I don't know. I am I'm one of those terrible people that thinks that we ought to. I'm like a literal land back guy. I'm like we should apologize, give all of the land back, and indigenous people should control America again.
Yeah.
What we did was genocide, and that's bad. So every time I read this, it makes me happy. But like population wise, there just simply are not enough. Like there just are not enough Native Americans alive and in existence to have their own
when
nation.
It's balkanized, I would say,
tragic,
there is,
but
right?
Like,
when there can be nations of 200,000 people or something like that. And it's explained in the lore, which is that, while these nations are called Lakota and Navajo, there are many other tribes and that move in part or in whole to those nations, which of course makes the names of the nations a little problematic, especially like with Navajo, which is not the term the Navajo would call their own nation, but
they call themselves Dene. It would be something.
I read this as, hey, these are some people who are not indigenous themselves trying to make a setting more interesting and inclusive. The way the native characters are written is not always ideal, but that's at least in my opinion, it's a thing you could fix in post if you wanted to use this setting.
Yeah, I guess like from my perspective, I'm for it. I like it. Like I like the idea of like an indigenous resurgence, like taking the opportunity of a failing United States to consolidate. There were lots here. So here's the thing. Here's what I would do, and I would, I guess like for me, I probably would like consult or ask somebody, but like there have been like American Indian confederations, lots of them of united tribes who either shared like a basic language or none, and it wasn't like a single tribal identity. It was a broader like coalition. And I could definitely imagine, in a time period like this with like a bunch of, political power up for grabs, like a coalition of indigenous peoples forming a nation state in the Great Plains or the Pacific Northwest. But yeah, it wouldn't be the Navajo Nation. It wouldn't be like the Lakota Nation. So good idea, I think. But yeah, I would make some tweaks.
Yeah, some renaming, and then of course everything is painted in a pretty broad brush, right? Texans are all like oil-rich, warmongering cowboys.
Here's the thing: it's funny when you do it for Texans. It's less funny when you do it for a native population. Yeah.
I guess I should say, moving to the Pacific, this is not the only native polity. There's also the Kingdom of Hawaii is independent and under Native Hawaiian control. Again,
that makes more sense than
given it's only been 30 years.
Right, yeah. That one I buy.
But, precariously balanced between more powerful, nations like Japan and Great Britain vying for their, very strategic Zeppelin refueling location. But on the coast in hated California is the nation of Hollywood, which controls a lot of the country's, culture and, movies and film, and has taken that to heart. Like a lot of their pilots, they go and they fight pirates, and then they film a film about them fighting pirates and stuff. It's very fun.
Incredible. I love that. Because this is, what is it, like Silver Age or Golden Age?
Yeah, something like
Golden Age Hollywood. And something as stupid as like actually fighting pirates, but filming it and is totally buy it.
Right.
Yeah, that's great.
It's great. It's like, the Empire State has poached Charlie Chaplin to build a studio in Manhattan. And everyone, there's like going to be a war over this. And then north is Pacifica, Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia in a very small federation that is flexing its naval power and technological bit out of Boeing, developing, like Tesla weapons and stuff like that up there.
Ooh. Oh, okay. So hang on. This was a question that I had that I forgot about. Like, is there weird tech? This reminds me of Sky Captain in the World Tomorrow or the Rocketeer. Is there, are there Tesla cannons and
so in the board game and the original setting, which I think was made during the time of the computer game, everything is pretty grounded. Like There's
Okay.
better machine guns and rockets and airplanes than existed at the time, but it's all like, oh yeah, you could see that being developed. There's like
Sure.
a
It's
homing
guns,
rocket or something like that.
It's rockets. It's nothing really out there.
There's hints in the board game later publications of what they were working on for the Xbox game, which has a ton of weird, 1930s and 40s mad scientist style technology, like weather control zeppelins, giant walking spider robots, Tesla
Nice.
cannons, all of this cool
Wild
stuff.
Wild West stuff, like
Wild
we were talking about. Yeah.
Wild Skies stuff. And so I think, for playing it in a game, it's like however much you want to crank up your mad scientist dial, it all works pretty well. If you want it more grounded or more gonzo. And then I think that's our tour of the Americas. There's also an independent Ontario and Quebec and Alaska where, there's not much of a state, but there's a lot of feuding white and red Russians from the world setting basically assumes that every civil war that like happened over the last 20 years is continuing on. So if you want to play a game in Australia or Spain or wherever, there's some kind of war, low-level war going on that is fought between airplanes.
You love to see it. Okay.
Yeah, so that's our alternate history setting, full of experimental aircraft and pirates and a diesel, one of the least used punks. Just another term for slapping punk on the end of it. Diesel punk aesthetic.
Diesel punk. Yeah, that tracks. Yeah, diesel punk. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I wanted to talk a little bit about what to me appeals about Crimson Skies and what a Crimson Skies or a Crimson Skies like role-playing game can be about or is good at being about.
Okay. I think you answered all of my setting questions.
Yeah, what about okay, wait.
No.
Mind. Any silly more setting questions? I think I'm the most knowledgeable person on the call and perhaps in the shattered states of North America about Crimson Skies lores. I've read all the novels, played all the video games, read all the source books.
Like the thing that I'm thinking about as a world builder, as a nerd, as a alternate history enthusiast, right? What so like booze, that makes sense to me, right? Booze is, that's a contraband that's smuggled, that's going back and forth. Where's the guzzling come from, Matt? Where is it being smuggled in from Texas? Does Texas have power because it's like selling diesel to all the other states, or like
right.
I don't know, Neo Saudi Arabia, like shipping,
Yeah. No,
I'm always thinking about supply
gasoline.
lines, right?
Yeah. Well, so if you look at, early petroleum consumption and production, right? There is like enough of it in places that are not Texas, like
that's true.
Pennsylvania and California. That you can probably hand wave most of it away. But yeah, that is essentially the major source of income for basically anywhere there was a oil field in the 1930s, right? You can imagine one today, and there's a lot more of them than just what we think about oil today, which is essentially in North America, which is essentially the Gulf of Mexico, the Permian Basin, and North Dakota. There are a lot more, lower production fields that were not used up yet.
That's a good point. There were a lot of derricks everywhere in the U.S. in the early days. So a practical question. I love the Sky Pirates idea. It makes sense. Yeah. Goods are being shipped by Zeppelin. Things aren't safe. What happens when, Captain Flying Blackbeard, do they force the Zeppelin to land? Do they shoot them down and just loot the corpse? How does they defeat the defenders? How does this sort of what are the practical elements?
Right.
Of this
how do you
piracy,
take a ship in this one?
Yeah. How do you take a prize? Yeah.
I think there's a quote in one of the source books that's like, you don't make any money by scattering a Zeppelin across the landscape. And so you shoot its defenders, and then essentially, while it might have some machine guns or something like that, it's a sitting duck to airplanes,
duck.
and so they will surrender, allow you to board, and under threat of we will shoot you down if you don't, or you take out its engine nacelles. Right, early Zeppelins had these outrigger pods essentially with engines, and the board game and the video games have mechanics for okay, you got to shoot these pods down, and this slows the Zeppelin down so you can catch it, or turns it into a sitting duck. And then there's also a lot of lore about sending Zeppelin raiders, so fly a cargo plane really slow over a Zeppelin, jump out and try and grab onto it. Because the thing about aviation during this time is like planes can go, a not unreasonable speed and not stall.
Really slow.
Really slow. Yeah. And so you try and grab on the Zeppelin. If you fall off, you use your parachute or just die. And then you swing into one of the windows or the gondola and try and take the thing by force. And booze is or helium tanks, right? Helium is an important commodity which Texas did control until pirates raided it, and then it was determined by the League of Nations to be sort of a neutral ground which all nations in a coalition would defend and share some of the profits. But but also kidnapping, right? If you kidnap the Rockefeller heiress or Errol Flynn as he was in his Zeppelin, heading off to site to film his Captain Blood, which is set in the skies, not in ancient history. Yeah. See, I can
Captain Blood is one of my favorite movies. It really holds up. If you ever want to watch a black and white that actually, I mean, many of them are good, but like it's a great pirate movie. Check it out.
Yeah, I think there's something in the thing that's like Captain Blood releases, Errol Flynn plays, and Captain whatever, but of course he's got a Zeppelin and a pirate. It's not a hit. It got made the same way as in our timeline, except it's not a historical film. It's set in the present day.
Okay, I think those are like I mean I'm having no trouble like buying into this, and I love the idea of this also like in this period you did have like you could be a dude with a plane, like this is a big
planes are not that expensive either,
and there's a lot of like adventure movies, real life adventure movies that are about some guy's got a cargo plane, and it was a time when you could be paid, you could make a decent living doing adventuring stuff, flying cargo from one place to another, and it wasn't all consolidated. So I have no trouble buying into just like that, but you're fighter pilots and in cool little dogfighters. So tell me about
it's also a great alternate setting for of course any so recently diverged 1930s America is still going to be sexist, at least for your heroes, for pilots, right? The air forces and militias and pirates seem to be plenty integrated with plenty of women pilots, which, of course, there was a lot of women in aviation in the 1930s and 40s.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's kind of a fun thing. And there's tons of sources you can go to for inspiration, obviously, like the Indiana Jones movies. You mentioned Sky's Captain, The World of Tomorrow, Doc Savage, The Phantom, any of the pulp novels and comics will get you in the feel for this game. I think the gameplay loop of a Crimson Skies thing, where there's a lot of nations you can go between, and the idea of having some kind of ship or base, probably a ship, a Zeppelin your players call home, and then they all have a fighter that launches from it to do missions is a perfect idea for a adventuring loop for a campaign.
Absolutely. I mean, it works the same as and we've talked about this a bunch. A pirate campaign is kind of runs itself, right? Your players, they have a ship, they want to go and make their ship better. They want to go after their enemies. They make more enemies. Like it's you can kind of like set them loose. So doing it, but they're in planes makes perfect sense.
And in like pulp conventions, right? Most of the like stories and campaigns for the board game or the video games, start out like that, but then there's a greater treasure to find, and in seeking that treasure you uncover some kind of conspiracy that is usually geopolitical in nature. The Germans are funding these pirates to do XYZ, or so and so is has got a deal to undercut the Pinkertons or Blake Aviation Security. And there's a spy that we got to go find on this Zeppelin that we got to raid, that kind of stuff. Oh, there's a new experimental fighter that's been developed and someone's trying to steal it, or we're trying to steal it, and then a larger plot unfurls that could have grave implications, right? Because, I think default to a 1930s setting is everyone's a little uneasy, right? The Great War ended, but we all know, maybe something's coming. And while Crimson Skies is not about, World War II, the idea that one could happen at any time, especially between all these nations, and we got to stop these people from launching a plot that will launch the world aflame again.
So a question that I have that isn't like a problem, right? But the something that is a little bit different, that slightly more challenging than like an adventuring party, is you're a squadron of fighters, right? So does the game, I guess it could go either way. I guess you could balance it, but are you spending most of your time in the skies? Like, is this a dogfighting campaign, right? Like, are you mostly pilots, or do you pilot and then like you're also like hopping out and doing deals and also like having running fights or fisticuffs or whatever? I could totally see it either way, but like we have talked at length about ship combat and like also like airplane combat. Those are challenging to model in RPGs.
Right. Especially with something like Crimson Skies, with its 1930s thing, obviously you're going to have a dogfight or something like that. But then, wouldn't it be fun if the players have this exciting chase through the streets of Chicago with Al Capone's gang on their tail, or something like that, or some kind of fisticuffs in a bar, and you would want stats for that too. My ideal system for this would be something akin to Lancer, where everyone's like out of combat stats and in vehicle stats are kind of separate, and you can level up both. But being good at being good at finding clues to the lost city of gold and wherever, Indiana Jones style, doesn't make you worse at being a pilot. Which is one of the problems with using an off-the-shelf system. And I should say, right, Crimson Skies is a narrative board game. So you have, you play it over a hex grid, and you have planes that you can customize, and you have pilots that you have stats for. And these can carry over from missions and earn experience and stuff like that. But it's not a role-playing game. There's no rules for what happened, how to resolve a conversation or an investigation or something like that. And the board game itself, while super fun, I love it, is really slow. There's no way to do a dogfight in under like 3 hours, right? Players chip away at armor and trade blows back and forth. It makes it a very exciting game, but it's too detailed for a role-playing game. Because I'm sure some people will be like, well, I've done Battletech or whatever, and when we have mech combat, we just play Battletech or Alpha Strike or something. But in my opinion, it's too slow. You'd have to use another system. And speaking of ones that are like generic and off the shelf, the one that screams most obvious to me for a Crimson Skies style game is Savage Worlds. It's pulp, it's fun, it has serviceable vehicle dogfighting rules, and you would just have to tell your players up front, like, hey everyone, put max stats in piloting.
In pilot. Savage Worlds also has weird science built in. Like that's one of the sort of like core settings. Like if you do want to include that kind of gonzo pulp stuff, like as we've discussed at length, it is a pulp setting. Like that is the core of the Savage Worlds. So that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, no, Savage Worlds out of the box with is I think perfectly fine for this game. Just make sure no one's bad at piloting, with the default assumption being you're all,
That's
the four of
important.
you
Yeah.
are a member of a squadron. And right, you could maybe divide the pilots. Savage Worlds is also great for you can divide things up, and maybe you could divide the pilot skill up into like 2 different types of things so players could feel specialized. But there's enough like vehicle stunts and stuff like that people can still feel like they have a unique pilot. I'd also say, Genesis, especially the vehicle rules in the Star Wars books are perfectly, like they kind of say it's like, hey, if you're doing you could do a squadron game, you could do an X-Wing squadron game. And yeah, I think this would be perfectly fine too.
I mean, let me ask you a question, because we've in our many years gaming together and, talking about games, working on games, we've gone around this question, but like, I'm not sure I've ever asked you directly, but like, I mean, do you prefer, so there's like 2 approaches, right, to this type of combat, right? There's a like a BattleTech type, like where you have like armor and lots of different weapons and hard points, and like it is slow, it's exciting, right? You're like blowing off like, chunks of things, and, really like granularly modeling, warfare between armored units. And then there's like an abstracted version, which is like something like Savage Worlds, or even more like you roll and like you did it or you didn't do it. Like, do you have a preference for this type of thing? Do you prefer like the crunchy BattleTech kind of things?
Yeah, for a role-playing game, like for me playing, I love a crunchy game. But most of the time I will just play something that can actually be accomplished in a small amount of time. Now, for a role-playing game, like I do like something in the middle, where it's not like you make a dogfighting roll and that resolves the dogfight, or that resolves your actions for one round. And I've used, just like rules light miniature stuff when I've run this type of game, where I just like, okay, yeah, I'm going to move over here. I'm trying to get behind them. And that way players feel like the sort of same type of combat you would get in a game like Pathfinder 2E or Lancer, where it's like things are moving around. And so for me, like my times running Lancer have been absolutely perfect for this. There is a Lancer space game, but it's focused on Ender's Game style fleet maneuvers, not individual dogfighting, called Lancer Battle Group. If Lancer ever made a fighter game, that's the rules I would be using.
I was going to say Lancer's always seemed like a really good like middle ground.
It's
like
a happy medium. It's
medium of
4E
crunch
style rules. It's
yeah.
like they're fast enough, but they have tactics, right? And the tactics often evolve around special abilities, because I think one thing you don't want to avoid is Crimson Skies, the board game, is based on many years tradition of air dogfighting simulator board games, which require not only deep knowledge of the mechanics, but like a little bit of like this one specific type of board game, miniature game skill. Like it takes some skill to, if anyone's ever played the X-Wing miniature combat game, right? To be good at dogfighting, because it's like, I'm predicting where this person's going, and I want to place where my person's going. And if you keep it rules light enough, that can work in a role-playing game, but it is hard for some people. And so, if you have people who are like, well, I'm not into doing a dogfighting board game, you maybe don't want to have that barrier to being good at the dogfights. Or maybe you do. You can always, as the GM, tilt the scales so the players are up against some foes that are just not as good as them, and their weapon rolls are terrible and stuff.
A rules light version of this that I think might be a good analog, or a good something to cobble together, is I played in a really great one shot of it's based on Apocalypse World. It's a game called Night Witches, based on Noctexan, based on the Soviet regiment of women fighter pilots that flew like biplanes, in World War II, and did bombing runs at night, and were incredibly cool and badass. But it wasn't really like focused on the dogfighting. It was also a lot like Apocalypse World, a lot of interpersonal relationships and dramatic moments and dealing with like, the secret police and misogynist Red Army officials and things like that. But like that, I think would be like a if you wanted to do a more rules light version of something like this, a place to go or a way to think. You could do.
I think Night Witches would be a good inspiration. It's just all of the details of Night Witches are a completely different tone than Crimson Skies, which is not is like, hey, I swung in on the chandelier and saved some people while firing my Tommy gun and then laughed it over a glass of champagne as me and my crew played
That's
cards.
true. Night Witches is a lot more.
Shit, we got this commissar is breathing down my neck and giving us shitty equipment and treating
That's
us
such a
terribly.
good point. The vibe is not at all like pulp action adventure. That's such a good point.
It's like I'm shooting someone down. They're probably not going to die. They'll hit the silk. I'll waggle my wings at them and speed off. Not like I'm murdering these fucking Nazis.
That's right. I'm killing these Nazis, and then I'm going to go home, and I'm going to try to like not get like sent to the gulag for whatever. That's true.
So
the vibe is not right.
Absolutely just port the rules over to the world of Crimson Skies or use the rules which are or the setting, which is incredible, is Warbirds, the role-playing game. And this came out a long time ago, but it's a rules-light kind of action pulp adventure set, again, in an alternate kind of interwar period, but this is in a bunch of floating islands that were once the Caribbean that were ripped out of the planet by a mysterious storm. And so now like Haiti and Jamaica and Cuba and part of the Yucatan are floating around. So you have this whole like world and civilization that is full of sky pirates and sky squadrons that is inspired by the peoples and history of the Caribbean, which I think is pretty cool. And they have
Matt, how have you never told me about this before? This is the coolest thing I have ever heard in my entire life.
I played it. It's a fun game. I'm sorry.
We're gonna have to do a review of this because this is the sickest thing I have ever heard. This is so cool.
Yeah, it is very cool. Where you can be, a Haitian, flying aircraft carrier captain and ace pilot and take out pirates as it floats through a cool realm. I think there's also a Jet Age Warboards, which is a more like 60s inspired thing, and a Space Warbirds, which is the peoples of the Caribbean exploring the universe, and it does the same thing. One of the things is the rules are very light. It's just a simple roll a d6 compared to a target number, but they added just enough extra to the dogfighting system that it works really well. You print off a sheet of paper that has kind of a big ladder with a bunch of spaces, and as we all know in dogfights, right, altitude equals speed equals win. And so like as you make maneuvers or checks or attacks or something like that, you're constantly gaining altitude or losing altitude, and you can only attack people who are at a lower altitude. So you're kind of doing a very abstracted combat scenario, but instead of mapping things out, you're mapping things out vertically, and it works really well.
Oh, that's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm into it. All right.
So I highly recommend Warbirds and I have the PDF in front of me, by Outrider Studios, authored by Steve and Kate Bergeron. I don't know how to say their last name. Anyway, the art in this book is also incredible. And the other one I will mention, if people like Fate, is Tachyon Squadron, which is
Bergeron, right?
Bergeron. Sorry. It's not an unusual name for me in my position in life. The fact that I don't know how to say it is very embarrassing.
I mean, I might be wrong, but I'm like,
Rob. Bergeron.
Isn't that how
Steve and Kate Bergeron?
I'm going to leave it in.
And there's great plane designs, which is, a must-have, too. And, a really cool setting. Very jazzy. You got to play a lot of jazz.
Jazz. Right. Sorry. Jazz. Of course. Like, jazz clubs in the sky, jazz clubs all over the country. Like, this
Zeppelin, that was a jazz club.
Oh man.
Great.
There's so much to do here.
Easy,
Yes. Oh, man. Yeah.
What have you met Winston Churchill on a diplomatic mission to the Empire State in a speakeasy in Manhattan, and a gyrocopter landed outside.
What a great conceit. Okay.
Yeah. Last nation I forgot. Oh, Columbia. Columbia is the loser state. It is Maryland, the District of Columbia, and is the rump of what's left of America, but is now the diplomatic neutral ground. The League of Nations moved its headquarters from Geneva to Washington, D.C. So that's what they use DC
Switzerland
for.
of the U.S.?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, the other one, Tachyon Squadron. It's a Fate game, and it's, inspired by like Wing Commander and, all of our favorite Battlestar Galactica, all of our favorite movies about space pilots who are cool and have feelings. And yeah,
we do love that.
And it's rules light. And, because of the way the system's set up, you can be good at other things and you can also be good at flying your plane. And it's more about, let's describe a cool narrative dogfight instead of worrying about, am I good at positioning my miniatures around or using my, tactical abilities to great effect. And if you have players like that, I would say just play Tachyon Squadron or play Tachyon Squadron and change the, plasma cannon to a Tesla cannon and the lasers to machine guns, and you're good to go.
Okay. Any final thoughts about Crimson Skies? Well, like I said, I always liked this to the extent that I knew anything about it. You have been a fan for as long. Sorry to blow you up on this on our podcast, Matt, but I remember when we were living together after college.
Yes,
you were working on a
Crimson Skies
board game,
tactical board game. I still have all my notes for this, so maybe one day
we'll do it someday. We'll make it happen. We'll buy the rights.
I have the rules for a rules light Crimson Skies dogfighting game that me and a couple of my friends have played couple times, which is great because again, the original board game rules, I want them to be great, and they just take too long. I just can't play a board game. This is a
great motivator for people to create, Matt. It's like you like something, you want it to be good, but it's not good, so you got to do it yourself. This is what drives a lot of people.
So my final thoughts of Crimson Skies are two things, which is first, as far as anyone can tell, Crimson Skies is dead as a doornail. I'm sure some people play it somewhere.
Rest in peace.
There are some fan communities.
Yeah. I looked it up, by the way. The video game got like a 90 Metacritic score. It was very well received. It's a good video game.
And the original PC one is also good. There's amazing voice acting throughout. It's all over the top and pulpy. It's super fun. The characters that are introduced in the game, the Black Swan privateer of the skies who may be Anastasia Romanoff, Charlie Steele, a Hollywood starlet turned pilot, Comrade Easter Whittaker, hero of the People's Collective. There's so many good characters and pirate gangs that are full of flavor. I love it, but it's all dead. And if you want any of this information, if you want to play the PC game, all I have to say to you is good luck. You probably need to figure out how to install Windows 98 SE or something like that.
If you have an Xbox or a Xbox emulator, you should get the game. It's fun.
You can get the Xbox game much, much easier. And the board game, you cannot find it in stores. I have a copy that you cannot have. However, if you poke around and you can find either used copies of the source books or PDFs of the source books, which is pretty much the only way to get this information. But again, it's not too hard to find if you're looking for the PDFs. But yeah, there's no. I forget. I think Jordan Wiseman may actually own some of the rights anymore, but there are no plans to do any more Crimson Skies things, as far as I can tell, and there probably never will be. I hope there are. So that's my first thought, and my second thought is. I think it's just a fun setting for both an experiment in how do I build a world that would be a fun role-playing game that really centers whatever my conceit for the players is in the driver's seat. And yeah, I think it works really well. Often, Rob, we talk about accessibility in our world building. And by that, we mean, can players easily understand the concept we're going for?
Yeah.
And we can rely on things that are popular. And I don't think, pulp 1930s action is super popular, right? We mentioned one movie that no one saw, Sky Captain, The World of Tomorrow. But
Yeah. And I don't know that anybody remembers The Rocketeer, which was...
I think people remember The Rocketeer fondly.
But, I mean, if you're not a millennial, what are the chances are that you know... But yeah, that's a good point. It's not... Yeah.
The other way to make it accessible, if you don't do that, right, is to draw upon parts of the real world, right? And I think everyone knows... They have a vague idea what like first half of the 20th century California Hollywood was like, or Chicago in the 30s or something like that, or and that makes sense to them, right? So you can rely on that if you do an alternate history, and I think that's a way to make something that is more high concept, or not high concept, but a concept that is unfamiliar, accessible, is using an alternate history, and I think this setting does it really well. Plus, I like pirates and I like planes.
Yeah, and we mentioned, dieselpunk of the punks is underutilized, but all of the elements, exactly like you're saying, they're familiar, they're understandable. People are going to understand America in the 30s. They're going to understand planes, Zeppelins. It's interesting and unusual without being... it's not so high concept that they're going to have to really stretch their brains to figure out what's going on.
I guess the more popular version of this type of setting is weird World War II, right?
Yes, which is very common.
Everywhere.
Yeah. And
that's fine. It's just not my jam.
That's boring. Sorry. The first Wonder Woman movie actually had some of this kind of thing in it, because it was in between, or
no, it was set during World War I.
Yeah, and that wasn't a bad movie, but that is another, I guess, sort of analog. I don't know, that's one of the things that why it sort of stuck in my mind, even though after playing it in college I did not interact with Crimson Skies a whole lot. Is just the aesthetic is interesting and unusual, but not so weird that it's hard to think about.
And unlike 17th century pirates, people in the 1930s had cool leather jackets and sweet scarves.
They did. They had very cool. They had aviator jackets, bomber jackets back when they were not ironic. They were just cool. Yeah.
Your setting has to have cool jackets. I'm sorry. No, that's not true.
I gotta agree. If you're gonna do a setting, you gotta have a cool jacket. If they don't have a cool jacket, what's the point?
Well, thanks for giving us your tuning in to Aerotone News, listeners, right, for the Parade
You've been listening
of Aces.
You've been listening to Dungeon Master of None on the over the airwaves from 101 KOF DM, Chicago's only nerd radio station.
Industrial States of America. President Ford signing. No, it's not. Ford's not president. Someone equally terrible is president of the Industrial States of America. And that's it. Thanks for listening. If you have questions or other ideas for another lore deep dive, hit us up, dmofnone@gmail.com, or you can, do a flyby, drop a letter off at our aerodrome and challenge us to a duel, and join our Discord. Links in the show notes.
Thanks for listening, everybody, and keep rolling them dice.